What is up, RotoGrinders? PFF Show, Pro Football Focus, Week 14. I am not Britt Devine. Britt is on vacation, presumably currently on Space Mountain or something like that. He'll be back next week. I'll be filling in admirably to the best of my abilities. Here, as always, Ian Hartitz from PFF. Ian, I do a Pro Football Focus, not Pro Football Focus. I do a Pick Six show Wednesday nights with John Daigle, with Rich Rebar. We break down the show on Wednesday nights, and sometimes it's like, I don't like this slate, but like by Thursday or by Friday or by Saturday, almost always by Sunday, it's like, oh wait, now it's coming to, oh right, I see it. Now there's almost too much good stuff. And it's Friday. We're recording on a Friday afternoon, and I haven't got to that point just yet. Just 10 games, obviously, 6 teams on bye. I know a lot of the season-long folk are upset. The NFL not aware that like they should be catering to fantasy. It's like a huge portion of their audience. Come on, get it together. I need you, is the point I'm saying here. I need you to point me in the direction of some good plays on this slate, because all I see is Minnesota and Detroit. And then what else? I don't know. Are you excited about this week's Week 14? Welcome to the show, by the way.
Great to be here, man. And look, I am always excited here. Week 14, that means we don't have that many left until we are unfortunately dealing with not having, 7 straight hours of no commercial football every single Sunday. So from that perspective, I'm with you. But man, like when I'm filling out, shows, trying to be prepared, getting my bets in line and stuff. Usually I can go through the slate and I see 2 or 3 that kind of immediately pop out to your point. Same thing with DFS, and had to go through it a good 2 or 3 times, before I even had anything that I was feeling confident about. But we've grinded enough, and I still think we got a few tricks up our sleeve. But hey, man, as they say, even on these slates where we look at it and it's like, man, this is tougher than normal. It's tougher than normal for everybody out there. So we'll do our best to hopefully finish on the right side of this.
Yeah, we're all dealing with the same puzzle pieces. The struggle was real for every one of us. But by the way, you mentioned the 7 straight hours. This is not to go back to the Pick Six thing, but Daigle and Rebar are like massively anti-red zone. And like, good Lord, I respect those guys.
Daigle, look, I love both those guys. Daigle's one of my best friends, like in the world. And with Daigle, he's just a contrarian to be a contrarian sometimes. That's a terrible take. He refuses to go to a football game with me on like Thursday night. He's like, I can't make it happen. Can't possibly do it. It's like, bro, come on, none of us. It's like there's a story Nick Saban told about Jason Garrett back in the day when Garrett was working with them in Miami, I think, and it was like Troy Aikman's wedding, and Jason and Troy were tight, and so Jason basically comes up to Saban. He's like, "Hey man, he was super nervous. Like I did all this to get ready and stuff." And he's like, "Can I maybe get tomorrow off to go to this wedding?" And Saban looks at him all insulted. He's like, "You really don't think that we could last like one day without you here? Like go to the freaking wedding, go have a good time. Not liking red zone. Get the hell out of here."
It really is a horrific take. Were the seats like in a suite? Were they on the 50-yard line? Were they nosebleeders? This stuff matters. What was the game? Who was playing? It
was going to be the Bengals-Dolphins game from in week 3 or week 4. Daigle's in Chicago. Reeves is up in Cleveland. I'm in Cincinnati. So, come down. It's about a 4-hour, 5-hour drive, depending on traffic. Come hang out, watch a little football. So Daigle and my guy, Evan Silva, were both like, absolutely not, can't do it. Bad take, in my opinion.
I am kind of like, as the older I've gotten, is like, the TV is literally built like to accommodate a football game. Like the screen is perfect. And,
standalone games, though, the Sunday night, Monday night, or Thursday night, that's reasonable, in my opinion.
I'm on board with that take. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about this is one of the ways where we can find some plays. Producer Steve's going to throw it up on the screen for you people out there, for myself as well. The Mismatch manifesto. This is where we can find maybe some potentially hidden plays. The first thing we're going to talk about as far as explosive passing plays. What is standing out for us? Who all of a sudden is going to pop that may not be popping in my brain as of right now?
Yeah, real simple. If you guys first time seeing the charts, blue is good, red is bad. I've combined a bunch of stats that we usually talk about as offense ranks X, defense ranks Y, but now we have a one-way street to just more easily interpret those things. So starting off with explosive pass plays, you can see the Dolphins, the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Bengals, and the Lions really popping. Even the Titans to an extent, but losing Treylon Burks, not great. If you do want to go deep diving at that tight end position, we got Chig Okonkwo. I've been working on this one throughout it. throughout the week, just 2.7K. And that Titans-Jaguars game, man, I do think it could be a sneaky shootout out of hand. More on that when we get to our bets. One thing I would also say, this Detroit Lions offense, man, they are back. The first 4 weeks of the season, they're the number one ranked scoring offense in the NFL. The next 4 weeks, they fell down to the 31st ranked scoring offense, but getting the Sun God back in, DeAndre Swift back, they're back to the second ranked scoring offense over their past 4 games of action. So good stuff going on in Detroit. On the running side of things, Miles Sanders, man, he is another guy that I think is going a little bit overlooked there, sitting at that low 6K range. And we've really seen Nick Sirianni and the Eagles adjust their offense to what the defense's weaknesses are. Novel concept out here, but not every coach does it. And we saw last week against a Titans team that's very stout at the line of scrimmage. Yeah, Jalen Hurts had like 39 pass attempts, even though that game was over shortly into the third quarter. The week before against the Packers, they were happy to just run the piss out of the ball all game long. I think we're going to see the latter strategy against the Giants' league worst defense and rushing yards before contact. Should mean all sorts of good, efficient touches for both Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders.
Are we concerned with Sanders getting siphoned at the goal line by, if not his quarterback, multiple running backs come out of nowhere, or just
it is annoying? It is annoying how often Kenneth freaking Gainwell is in the game. It's the same thing in Kansas City when you see Jerick McKinnon inside the 5 instead of Pacheco. So it's annoying, but like Kansas City, if we're going to have multiple parties involved, it might as well be in a top 2 scoring offense like we have in Philly and KC. So how about Miles Sanders, man, telling us all not to draft him back in July or whatever it was, like ultimate 0 RB truther, Miles Sanders driving down his own value.
Well, he had I believe this is one of the things in the offseason, 0 touchdowns last year. Is that correct?
Absolutely 0 on like 165 touches, and this year he's got 8 or 9 on about 200. So what a comeback year for Miles Sanders.
Yeah, good for him. And you mentioned the Lions. I mean, I guess you mentioned the week 1 through 4, 5 through 8, or whatever it is. It's also home road stuff too. Like the dome has been phenomenal. And the Lions last week, I think they did not punt the entire game. Is that correct? Can you confirm that one? No punter necessary. You should never have a punter. Just for the record.
Thank you. Preach.
Nothing angers me more than coaches punting at the 50-yard line and 4th and 5.
Well, isn't that the twisted thing? Older folks, or not, I don't even say older folks, but people that hate on analytics. It's like you want people to kick more, because that's usually the result. They hate when teams go for it when they shouldn't be going for it, which I just completely disagree with. So I don't want kickers in fantasy football. I don't want them in real life football. We have a sport for them. It's called soccer, or if you want to call it football too, go ahead.
Yeah, but the other thing is with the announcers framing it away, they're gonna roll the dice and do the right thing. Look at this big gamble. They're going for 4th and 2.
Half of these big gambles, they show the odds and it's 50.5% versus 49.5%. All these things, man. And then of course, when a team punts and then the other team, whatever, when they don't make the aggressive decision and it doesn't work out, it's never the fault of analytics and not on that side of things.
Yeah, was it the Chiefs last week? I think it was there was some team last week that just punted and gave the game away. But hey, It's a forward-thinking show here at PFF, and we care about Week 14 and Week 14 only. What about pace? Pace matters. What's popping out as far as fast pace, as far as slow pace? These games coming up this weekend.
A lot of pretty solid blue ones here. Jets, Bills, Texans, Cowboys, Eagles, Giants, and the fastest one of the week on the main slate is going to be Chiefs and Broncos. So Dolchich, I guess, is our bring back on the Denver side of things. Jerry Jeudy, if you're really feeling yourself, but just been such a rough season for the Broncos. The only thing I care about these days in Denver is if Russ can end up throwing for more touchdowns, then he has bathrooms in his house. Shout out to Kent Wyrock, for continuing to track that ever important metric.
What's the official count in that? I love that. Is it 12? Is that the actual how many bathrooms?
12 is how many bathrooms he has. Okay. He needs to average 1 passing touchdown per game for the rest of the way out to get there. 8 freaking passing touchdowns for Russ in 11 games. Hate to see that. So a little bit slower ones. The Browns Bengals is giving me a little bit of pause, but that said, I think people are already kind of scared off of Cleveland after Watson's, again, terrible performance last week. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I'm just, putting more stock into the guy we saw from 2017 to 2020. I'd like to, not be behind a week on getting into the Cleveland eventual, I think, offensive surge. And then also Jaguars at Titans. So, these aren't egregious, as we can see on on the Thursday night game, Raiders and Rams had the slowest one. So once you see, I'm more concerned when it's in the 64, 65 range when it's combined. So Jaguars, Titans, maybe I'm just ignoring it because I really like my over bet that I'm going to talk about there in a little bit. But Derrick Henry and this Titans offense, man, in the last 4 games that they've had Henry facing Jacksonville, they scored over 30 points every single time out. And as long as Trevor Lawrence is going to be healthy, we've seen this Titans defense, while they've been solid throughout the year, much better against the run than the pass. So I do think guys like Christian Kirk, Zay Jones could still get going here.
What's the deal with Henry? Like the D-Hember has kicked in. He's not been good so far. He's been bad for like a month or so. His efficiency's down. Like some people are saying it might be his toe, the foot. But the Jaguars historically have been a cure-all for anything. Injuries wise, are just slumping. Do you have an official? Is that something that a tease for later? I'm curious where you're at as far as Henry this week because I don't know what to do with him.
We're going to see it over the next 3 weeks. He gets the Jaguars this week, the Chargers in week 15, and then his, just solid market off, no questions about it, 200-yard performance against the Texans in week 16. So I think it's going to change, but no, you're right, man. I mean, he's not even had more than 3.1 yards per carry in each of his last 4 games. So surprisingly, like he's already got career high marks in receptions and receiving yards. So that's a little bit been saving him through what's otherwise been a porous, end of the stretch. I will say, I mean, he has faced, loaded box of A+ defenders more than any other running back in the NFL. So we have seen though, Derrick Henry and honestly, Saquon Barkley is another guy where just over these past 3-4 weeks hasn't been the same guy. And now Saquon's even dealing with that neck injury. So just goes to show, man, sometimes, we think we know something with these running backs and then it'll change. And similar sentiment here with these rookie wide receivers breaking out late week to week league. And it's been a little bit of a rough spot here for Henry and Saquon lately.
Yeah, that one just popped up earlier today where the coach Daboll basically said there's a chance, like most likely, I guess Barkley's going to go with the neck there is obviously something to monitor. And I guess if he doesn't go, Matt Breida season, maybe, I guess.
Yeah, I wouldn't, it's certainly not like Dalvin Cook cross out his name and just put Madison there, type of situation, but he would become certainly an intriguing play. So if it's one of those things where people really get behind it and they drive up, we're looking at like the 40% type of chalk running back, then I'd probably be out on it. But I think he'd be, especially in a week with 6 buys, I mean, he'd certainly be in that low end RB2 landscape. My only concern with Breida is like he was with Brian DeBull in Buffalo last year in a pretty wide open backfield, and he never even carved out like a little role in that situation. So he has been used well ahead of Gary Brightwell as the clear-cut backup. And if it happens like now, like it sounds like Saquon, like this, I mean, he wasn't even on the injury report until yesterday, I believe. So the fact this happened this week, I don't think they have time to sign guys like Wayne Gallman, like we're seeing the Seahawks do, and actually have even more guys to complement them that aren't even on the roster, for the time being. So Matt Breida, to me, closer to RB20 than RB10, but yeah, he'll certainly benefit.
Yeah, maybe they're playing games with the Eagles. Who knows? Some gamesmanship. I mean, I assume Barkley's going to play. We'll see. And like you mentioned the box being stacked against Henry. Like, wouldn't you stack the box? We got Robert Woods and like NWI and like Austin Hooper. I mean, you have to stack the box. Why wouldn't you? There's no threats as far as the vertical game, but
the one guy that was starting to give you that threat, Treylon Burks, unfortunately, got knocked out when he somehow still caught that touchdown. So it's Chigakonkwo and then everyone else, man.
He's going to be, from what I'm seeing, Chig is going to be like the DK de facto punt, like hash game tight end. We'll see. Stay tuned. Things change, but
him or Dulcich, it's going to be a lot between those two.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, if you have a little bit more money there for Dulcich and you're a fan of mullets and facial hair just in general, by all means, fire. If you want to run back something in Kansas City, if you want to attach yourself to Russ Wilson and his 12 bathrooms. But I pull up the schedule as you're talking. Is he going to get there? He's got KC twice. He's got the Rams. He's got the Rams. Both LA teams in Arizona.
Nothing's guaranteed. I mean, they're the single worst scoring offense in the league. It's one of these things where, I mean, over these last, I know he just got hurt, but like I caught myself in like week 13 or so. I was like, all right, Jerry Jeudy's out. KJ Hamler's out. Obviously, Tim Patrick's been out for the season. So it's only Cortland Sutton, like absolutely ingrained as the number 1 guy. And like, I struggle to rank him inside the top 30. Same thing with Latavius Murray. It's like, oh my gosh, okay, all these guys get hurt. Melvin Gordon gets waived. Suddenly he's getting over 80% snaps. Like, fading Latavius Murray on the workload that he was getting. Like the only other guy I even remember kind of doing that with was Kalen Ballage with the Dolphins a couple years back when they were just absolutely miserable. Because usually, man, we see it like Zonovan Knight, Dearness Johnson, and yeah, sure, they're performing fine. But at the end of the day, it's like, who cares? I just found out who this guy was last week. He's getting 20 touches. Like, okay, we're going to go ahead and fire him up. That's how bad the Broncos offense is. Even when we've gotten like the volume completely concentrated on one player, still hasn't been enough for, again, anything more than like wide receiver 3, RB3 treatment.
Some great names you threw out there, by the way. And I'm a UCF homer, and I can't play Latavius Murray. I can't do it.
No, can't do it.
Fire up the manifesto once again on the screen. But I'm not sure if it was mentioned or not, but this is on your Twitter account that people are not aware. By all means, check out Ian's Twitter. Look, everybody follows you. If anybody knows anything as far as football, but if you're not following Ian, follow Ian on the Twitter. Hartitz, Hartitz. Talk to me about, I believe we're at pressure. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Appreciate those kind words. But yes, popping off in the blue, meaning we're not going to see too much pressure at these quarterbacks. Tyler Huntley against the Steelers. I mean, this is a situation where I think we saw the 4 quarters last week, and after Lamar got hurt, they really struggled to move the ball up until that final drive, and then they found the end zone. So it worked out. But just even when the Ravens were winning this year, the offense hasn't been going great. But Steelers defense, I know they've gotten healthier with TJ Watt and Fitzpatrick, back after missing a little bit of time respectively, but still haven't been their usual dominant selves. So I do think that Huntley and Mark Andrews, another guy that we've been waiting to pop off, could be a sneaky solid tournament stack. Also looking at Sam Darnold, where no, I'm not so much looking at Sam Darnold, but DJ Moore, someone that we have seen, sadly, like I get it, guys. The fact that Sam Darnold is a relative quarterback upgrade, like I hear myself saying those words and I don't love it either, but it's true. And DJ Moore was someone that this year couldn't even like really break through the wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 barrier more weeks than not. So it almost throws off like our thinking, because we've always been wanting more from DJ Moore, but this year so much worse than even what we were seeing in 2020 and 2021, specifically that last year with Sam Darnold under center. So already saw it before their bye with him going for over 100 yards and a touchdown, with a lot of that in Patrick Surtain's direct coverage. Good stuff there. And then finally, as we'll get to on our bets, I mean, as good as the 49ers defense is, the one thing that Tom Brady hasn't lost the ability to do this year is get the ball out of his hands quickly and really avoid taking too many sacks and just letting pressure overwhelm him. And really, it's been him and who is the other? Oh my gosh. Tua, him and Tua. That's it. These two quarterbacks, when you look at who can get the ball out of their hands quickly, you usually end up seeing the Ben Roethlisberger, Jimmy Garoppolo, like the real low ADOTs associated with that. Brady and Tua really stand out over the past 2 years as the only guys able to get the ball out in, under 2.5 seconds consistently, but still keep that high average target depth and threaten defenses downfield. So as good as Nick Bosa and this defense is, I really do think it is that pressure that helps compensate for their lack of overall talent in the secondary. So when I see Brock Purdy getting not 3 points, but 3.5 points against Brady and company, that's a little bit too steep for me. Yeah.
I mean, know nothing else, but knowing that Brock Purdy is quarterbacking a team that's facing Tom Brady is laying 3.5 points. I kind of understand. I get it. I know why, I suppose, but it is still pretty weird.
He just lost to Jacoby Brissett 2 weeks ago. I get it. But again, 3.5, you had to go that extra half.
You got the hook too, just to tease you even more. It's such a bummer. You mentioned Tua, and I get it. I understand why the NFL did it. They spared us Russ again. Smash the over on shots against Russ Wilson, by the way. Whatever the number was, the over was smashed. 2.5, way over. And we're just starting the show. But, they spared, the country having to watch Russ again. But I really wish that Miami Charger game was in the main slate. That would change things up so much more. Give us some more options. Should be a lot of fun, Herbert versus Tua. And I know it's a great Twitter matchup, too, because – there's all sorts of rabbit holes you can get into that. It's like Herbert's just good because he has a good play every once in a while and he looks great on Twitter. But in real life, all right, let's go. Oh, by the way, and you mentioned Mark Andrews. Are you tired of talking about or hearing about the splits with Huntley? Like, no, really, he's been better with his Huntley. Like that's something that I've heard multiple times. And at this point, everybody knows that, right? Is that real? Do you buy it? Is it a big enough sample size for you?
No, it's freaking what, 3 games or whatever we're working with. And guess what? Andrews had a bunch of big games with Lamar, and he even had a big game with Josh Johnson. I'm starting to think that Mark Andrews is just really, really good at football. Like, that's my big takeaway from the entire thing. So look, Huntley, again, he averaged 205 passing yards per game in these 5 or 6 extended appearances he's had. And that's pretty close to what Lamar was doing this year before getting injured. So I think Huntley is a really good backup quarterback for the Ravens. We saw him flashing all over the place in the preseason. Instead of just, propping up these guys, it always has to turn back into Lamar slander with some folks. So I'm not going to stand for it. I think, again, though, I think the Huntley-Andrews stack, though, does make some sense. Maybe even DeMarcus Robinson if you're feeling feisty. But, okay, we got the yards before contact up now. And, again, really looking good for Miles Sanders this week with the Giants' just general inability to really control the line of scrimmage more against more running backs than not. Also seeing the Ravens pop, but it's just so muddled. Even if we get Dobbins back this week, Gus Edwards is going nowhere. Kendon Drake, Justice Hill, all these guys stay involved. So I am more so continuing to just focus on Huntley and Andrews. We do have the Bills popping a little bit, but now that's the thing, man. In Buffalo and honestly in New York, because Zonovan Knight's been such a big topic in the fantasy world, Zonovan and James Cook, yes, their roles are a lot better than they were a couple weeks ago. And that's relevant. And I get it. These are 2 guys that were free agents. That's why we're talking about them so much. That's why they've been on the cover of these waiver wires. But honestly, they're still just lead backs that are in 3 running back committees. And in the Jets case, an offense that I don't exactly expect to see fireworks out of every single week, especially not on the road in Buffalo. So James Cook, Zonovan Knight, relative to where they were 3-4 weeks ago, things are looking great. Still quite a few mouths to feed in those backfields when there's, it's 2022. We only have so many, one back workhorse, situations in the NFL these days. 2 we can live with, 3 or 4. That's when things can get complicated, especially with a guy like Zonovan, where again, if the Bills get up by a lot, which is kind of what we're expecting, given their 10-point favorites, we could see way more Michael Carter and Ty Johnson than anybody would prefer.
Hey, since you brought it up, how much of an outlier is that, or is it not an outlier? Is that a sign of things to come as far as James Cook? I believe he had the most usage he's had the entire season last week. They even worked in Hines a good bit. I think the more we've seen it, most we've seen him all season long as well. Theoretically, Cook is going to be the guy at some point. He's got some draft equity to him. He's got some he's electric. He's got some burst. Is that going to sustain this week, or we don't know? Or we'll be like, well, wait a second. Last week, maybe just for whatever reason, just got a little more than expected, and now he's going to get pushed back, and Singletary rises again. It's a murky situation, and I have no idea which way it's going to go.
I think that first point you made is the key part that a lot of people are overlooking. Nyheim Hines played 24 snaps on offense in his first 4 games with the Bills, and he played 23 snaps in that last one. So it's not like James Cook got this, I remember when Travis Etienne, before they got rid of James Robinson, Etienne got this 85% snap roll, 20 plus touches. And you do look up and you see, the rushing and receiving numbers from Cook. And I agree with what you're saying about him, showing some true juice out there, and they spent a 2nd-round pick on him for a reason, but just 43% of the snaps out there. I mean, I don't think Devin Singletary is completely going away. He's a good running back that they continue to trust in their biggest games, each and every year now for a good 3 years running. So I think it's a 3 running back backfield, unfortunately, in an offense that is really good for everyone, and especially, the Bills in real life and everything, but not these running backs, man. Josh Allen is going to scramble, or he's going to throw the ball downfield instead of checking it down. And then he's the most likely party to score once you get inside the 5-yard line. So it's one of those things where when you consistently look at Bills running backs, I haven't pulled it for them recently, but honestly, Ravens, the Eagles last year, not so much this year. They're scoring so many points that it doesn't really matter. But when you have these dual threat quarterbacks, it really does hurt things for their running backs. And you consistently see the team running backs in terms of carries and targets down near the bottom of the league. So it's just not the most fantasy friendly offense for Cook and Singletary and even Hines. But yeah, on the rise for Cook. I don't trust it to continue though. Long story short.
Yeah. Talk to me about passing yards per drop back. What are we seeing this week? Anything popping out for you?
Yeah, let's see here as I pull it up. We do have, again, that Sunday night game with Tua looking good. Awfully annoying that we can't get tapped into that. But Joe Burrow and the Bengals, I mean, the fact that it sounds like Higgins is going to be out there. I believe I saw Zach Taylor say that earlier. Jamar Chase, obviously, 2nd game back. And Joe Burrow, man, just has been absolutely grooving lately. I believe 4 of his last 7 starts now he's finished as the overall QB1 or QB2. So he runs a little bit more than I think we'd give him credit for last year, obviously coming off that horrific injury. He wasn't quite as down to do it. But, I do think that's something something where even if we do see quarterbacks run less as they get older, maybe we should put a little bit more mindfulness into the second year coming off these injuries. We've also seen Dak Prescott be a little more willing to run around this year. So just something to keep in mind with Joe Burrow and that ever explosive Bengals passing game.
By the way, we have breaking news, not on the show. I'm not sure if you caught this. Treylon Burks officially ruled out. Okay. We mentioned his name earlier in the show. Man, that's kind of a bummer.
Expected, but no, it sucks for sure. He was really starting to come on strong. One of several rookie wide receivers this slate. And unfortunately, man, doesn't really get me excited about Robert Woods or Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. All comes back to our guy Chick.
Yeah, I'm not going to front. I don't know who CJ Board is. I don't know.
He was on the Giants, but I'm with you. That was a guy where the first time I heard his name, I was like, yeah, what?
What is a Racy McMath? What? I like a receiver named Race though. I assume he's fast.
We gotta get some Ray McLeod out there. He's in San Fran these days. River Craycraft is one of my random names we've seen pop up over the years.
Yeah, I'm just looking at
CJ Board. Okay, now this is how I knew CJ Board. I think Jason Garrett called a reverse for CJ Board last year when he had a healthy Kadarius Toney, and we were all just like, what the hell are we doing out here, man? That's how I found out who CJ Board was.
Yeah, I must have blocked that out or just forgot that happened, or I wasn't on Twitter that night, but I don't recall. That name is it's not popping a bell for me, but and McMath, I don't know who that is either, but yeah. All right. We'll look into it, I suppose. Man, what a disaster Tennessee is. That's a big hit for me. All right. We have one more, right? We have the EPA perspective. What do you have for me?
Yeah, so the one thing I like to track with this are teams that actually have a relative offensive advantage in terms of combined EPA per play, but are still underdogs. And 3 qualifiers this week, the Vikings sitting at +2, the Ravens +2, more understandable because of the quarterback change, and the Jaguars +4. So Jacksonville is a team that's been popping up on this a lot. And while they have had some lows, I mean, we saw it last week, not able to keep pace with the Detroit Lions and all that, they have had some real nice moments this year. And I do think Trevor Lawrence has been continuing to play despite having that injury last week, his best football really of his career over these last 4 or 5 weeks. So against the Titans, again, I'm probably not going to be riding too much with the actual Jacksonville side of things, but I do think they can keep this game competitive, hopefully putting up a lot of points out there. And yeah, I think the Vikings +2, I mean, it is one of those things where you see the Lions favored, and I get it. They're playing well, but just the Vikings have been playing pretty well too, man. Seeing them perform as well as they did, just especially on offense against the Patriots and the Bills. I know we had that Cowboys absolute disaster going on, and Mike White made things close last week, but even that game too, for them to put up 27 points against the New York Jets, Kirk Cousins, those guys, I think they can keep pace with the Lions. Can the Lions actually, continue to put up 30+? We will see.
You mentioned sports gambling. I saw the opening that line. Minnesota was, I think, favored by a point, maybe a point and a hook. And now it's Detroit by a point and a half. It swung as the week has progressed. Good segue into our next segue. Of course, that was the manifesto. Feel free to check that out on Ian's Twitter account, PFF as well. But spreads and totals, I did not pick anything, but I was just going to ask you about that game. It's funny you brought that up because I thought that was peculiar. And I kind of lean Detroit. Maybe I'm just a sucker for the Lions. We love the Lions, right? As a neutral fan, they're a fun team to root for. Not that Minnesota's a team to dislike, but I just think Detroit's a fun team to get behind. But yeah, you have a couple takes, and you said you're in Ohio. Ohio has a sports gambling now. Are you partaking? Are you enjoying that? Are you dabbling?
I still gotta go offshore for another month. It gets fully legalized, I believe, on January 1st here. So it's a shame, man. Move that Buckeye Georgia game back a day, and I'm sure that would have been a nice way to kick things off for them. But it's okay. I've still found a way to manage over here. But yeah, with the Lions, man, they finally started getting things going. I mean, it was just nauseating, I thought, the amount of people that were kind of picking them as this big-time underdog and everything this year. And look, I mean, it's, again, last 4 or 5 weeks, they've really turned things around. They've gotten healthier, so I guess that makes sense. But there was an awfully quiet stretch there from everyone screaming, restore the roar, for all those summer months. And it has always struck me where, Dan Campbell, it's we're really giving him the benefit of the doubt here because he just says some kind of wild shit sometimes in interviews. And he's a really exciting guy and stuff, but I don't know. I'll kind of take the Mike McDaniels of the world who were a little more confident in actually what they're doing on the field versus, in press conference. conferences. Yeah, well, he is pretty entertaining in the press conferences too. So maybe not the best example. Regardless, I do have 2 totals and 1 spread that I like this week. Already kind of talked about each of them, throughout the manifesto to an extent. But Jaguars Titans, man, this total has slipped all the way down to 41. Unless I'm missing some weather news, I do really think that this is one that we should be pounding that over with. Titans have scored 30 plus on Jacksonville again, 4 straight games with a healthy Derrick Henry. And yes, last week was the first time the Titans allowed more than 20 points in a game since week 3. They do have a solid defense, but their run defense is far better than the pass. I do think we've seen enough out of Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Trevor Lawrence, and company to think that they can stay competitive throughout this one. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we do actually see Jacksonville have a little more success than most teams do on the ground against this group. Jacksonville leads the league in yards before contact per carry. And with ETN, man, that dude looks like he's shot out of a cannon every time he touches the ball. Only takes 1 or 2 plays for him to, make it up in a hurry. Also liking Patriots and Cardinals over 43.5. This one is on Monday night, so cheating just a little bit. But again, against this Patriots defense, I know we always just give them the benefit of the doubt because we got Bill Belichick there. And yeah, I guess they've earned the benefit of the doubt over the years. That said, man, last 2 months, when they're not playing Zach Wilson or Sam Ehlinger, they really haven't looked all that great. The Vikings scored 33 on them. The Bills scored 24 last week. I just don't think that a finally pretty healthy Cardinals offense coming off a bye with Hopkins, with Hollywood, with Kyler, James Conner, I think that they can at least, be putting up something in the 20 to 30 point range. They are coming off their first game of the year with at least 150 through the air and on the ground against the Chargers. And then with Mac Jones and company, it's Cardinals defense continues to be pretty atrocious. I think they can at least, keep pace to an extent. And then finally, Buccaneers plus 3.5. Against Brock Purdy, 3.5, as we were saying earlier. That's honestly just what it comes down to. So Buccaneers plus 3.5, Patriots Cardinals over 43.5, and Jags Titans over 41, as long as T-Law is starting.
You clearly haven't heard Brock Purdy's nickname. That's what's going on here.
Maybe that's fair.
I just pulled up a chief meteorologist, Kevin Roth. I just pulled up his weather page. This is a Friday. Things change. Weather is fluid, yada, yada. But nothing there to see as far as weather. You're talking about Tennessee. No game is beyond yellow. Yellow in Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Giants, San Fran for what it's worth. Showers likely in San Francisco. Again, weather is not perfect. It's more than 2 days out, let alone 5 hours before the game starts. Just kind of monitor things like that. One I just wanted to point out, I just thought it was interesting. And I like the Arizona take because I like just betting on a dome with a low total. Just that's good enough for me, right? Just 43.5 and Arizona just feels weird. It just seems, I understand their offense has been disappointing, and I understand New England's defense has played pretty well and yada yada. New England's offense is just kind of grinding it out with Stevenson. I just thought it was a little peculiar. The Seattle line seemed like almost not enough. Vegas is kind of saying they're basically the same with 4 points is generally neutral field. You get 3 points for the home field. And I know Walker is dinged. Running backs don't matter, yada yada, but maybe it does if you're replacing with guys that don't really run on the tackles, like Homer in Dallas, the ghost of Tony Jones. We'll see with Walker, but I don't know. In 12th man's generally, historically, at least a tough place to play there. Big trip for Carolina. Does 4 seem like not enough? It's disrespect all season long for Geno, obviously, but I just thought it should be like a 6, not a 4.
No, I think that's a fair point. Geno Smith, again, I don't know how longer the dude needs to consistently put forward top 10, even top 5 numbers before we're like, yeah, he's pretty good. It wasn't like he was going out there sucking for 6-7 straight years. He was a backup quarterback behind guys like Eli, like Russell Wilson, who he was just never even going to get a chance to find a field with. So yeah, it's shocking, but we have to get it through our heads at some point that in the year 2022, Geno Smith at a minimum is a lot better than someone like Sam Darnold. So I'm with you. It is too short of a spread there. And if we don't have any weather problems, I think you could argue Kenneth Walker, man, as great as he does look at times, really does have some of that boomer bust to him as a rusher. So it's great when he's booming, but there's a reason why there were some disappointing weeks there where he just wasn't able to get more out of, 10, 15 carries than you'd really be expecting. So if more of the offense is now being funneled to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, man, I don't hate that at all.
Do you have a lean as far as Walker playing this week? I feel like it's less likely.
I don't think so. He hasn't practiced all week. Pete Carroll, is the ultimate optimist. I still Oh man, last year the whole Chris Carson thing, basically calling him like day to day, and then it's like, oh, we know. And then they put him on IR, and then it's like, well, we're just happy he's gonna be back for training camp. It's like, Pete, just shut up, man. Let the doctors talk about this.
Is Carson's career kind of over?
Yes, he retired before the season. Like,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
His neck
yeah.
thing.
I knew it a neck thing. I wasn't sure if he was trying to work his way back. That's what a bummer.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna give our fair plays position by position in a second from a DFS perspective, tournaments and cash as well. Gonna run through that. Before we do that, you do have some player props that you like. Do you want to put a little light on?
Yep, two quick ones here. I like Juju Smith-Schuster over 48.5 receiving yards, just minus 115 over at DraftKings. Look, his season, even including the games where we saw him get concussed and leave early, and then also the next week where he was eased back into action, didn't have his usual full-time role, even including those, he's at 62.5 receiving yards per game. Before the injury, he was at 72.8. So over these last 3 weeks, again, it's been disappointing. He only got 33 when he got knocked out early, 38 when he was eased back in, and 35 last week with normal usage. The problem was that Mahomes had season low marks in pass attempts and passing yards. So while the Broncos are a good defense, and we've seen, you can say great defense, they've been really more than good enough all season long for this team with even an average offense to be a playoff contender, but Russ and company haven't been able to be even that. That said, if you do go just a little bit deeper and look at their performance against wide receivers aligned from the slot, you do see them ranking as a bottom 12 group in that category. So Juju really is the only guy we've seen other than Travis Kelce be consistent in this offense throughout most of the season. And I think it's just, again, been that concussion that ultimately took away 2 weeks and then one naturally bad game last week. So seeing his route rate back up over 80% last week after he got eased in, I'm going back to well with a guy that in terms of fantasy points, but obviously you get a lot of fantasy points. You had a lot of yards as well. 3 straight weeks as a top 12 wide receiver before he originally got banged up. And then also I do like Christian McCaffrey over 13.5 rush attempts. Again, I want the props I really like to at least take the over on. It's just when I think that the lines were made based on a sample size that probably shouldn't have been used as a whole. So if you look at him on the 49ers this entire season, he's at 12.5. They put the line at 13.5 as just a small bump. But again, when we look at these games, he gets eased in the first game. That was only 8 rush attempts. And then he had the knee irritation game against the Saints, only had 11, and then just had a big time blowout where he only had 7. He's easily cleared this with 18 and 17 in his 2 most applicable games without Elijah Mitchell in the fold with Brock Purdy instead of Jimmy G. I'd expect them to run the ball more. And other than CMC, again, you got a banged up Deebo Samuel and then just Mason, Tyrion Davis-Price, Tevin Coleman. Like, okay, that's fine. I'm sure they'll get some run, but only 13.5 for CMC. I'd be very surprised if he's under 15.
How tough is it to run against Tampa these days? I know historically they're pretty tough, pretty run stout.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be the prettiest matchup. We've also seen San Francisco consistently be able to run the ball on just about anyone. So in terms of the yards before contact metric, which is usually how I'm trying to get a feel for it, they actually profile as a slightly above average matchup. So one of those things where, great reputations on that group, but they probably aren't quite as deep on the defensive line as they were in past years. And then someone like Devin White, I do think probably, we follow the good plays a little bit more than noticing, the occasionally hectic lack of run fits and things like that.
All right, fair plays, DFS perspective, main slate, the 10 gamer. You want to talk about cash game quarterbacks first?
Yeah, right now the build I got going, I do think Jared Goff at just 5.6K is where I'm leaning here. Like, again, just seeing guys, and honestly, in my quarterback column on PFF.com out every single Wednesday throughout the season. I just did like a blind comparison, like who's that Pokemon back in the day between between Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff, and like Goff has been every bit as good as Cousins really this entire season. And again, when we look specifically at these last 4 weeks with everyone healthy, Goff has been balling. Highest game total on the slate. I am expecting Goff to be the chalkiest guy on the slate, and I think it makes sense. So you're able to stack Goff with the Sun God, who is still underpriced, especially on a full PPR site like DraftKings. I think that stack is more than reasonable to build the rest of the lineup around.
Yeah, I mean, Amon-Ra running it back with Jefferson, like picking one of those quarterbacks, and we'll talk tournaments in a second. That's going to be a really popular route. Is that something you like in tournaments also? Is there another route you like as far as tournaments, way to be a little bit different? What do you have as far as tournament quarterbacks?
reasonable enough, but definitely got a couple other stacks that we try and build around. And also Jefferson is to bring back, always fine. But Adam Thielen there sitting under 5K against, a group that we have seen get burnt by pretty much offenses of all shapes and sizes this year. Very much still a dead last ranked defense in terms of points per game allowed. So don't be sleeping on that Vikings offense on the other side of the ball, obviously. But yeah, talked about Tyler Huntley and Mark Andrews before. So Huntley at just 5.5K, man, I feel like, we've talked ourselves into a lot worse quarterbacks that just have that rushing ability. I mean, come on, Sam Ehlinger a couple weeks ago, people were really getting behind there. So I know 5.5K. I think Ehlinger was even like 5K or less than that.
Or 9, I think he was.
Okay, so it was a little bit of a pricing difference, but still 5.5K, we're saving a good chunk of money there. So I do think with Huntley, again, the Pittsburgh defense, I think probably receiving a little bit too much love based more on their reputation than on the group we've seen specifically this year. And then just, hey, Mark Andrews splits, that's great. But look at just Mark Andrews, the tight end without, who cares who the quarterback is? It's Mark Andrews. And again, at the pricing tight end, I do think a good way to go contrarian in tournaments is not taking the easy, cheap guys in Dulcich and our guy Chico Okonkwo. How many times can I say that name? This podcast, pay up for a Mark Andrews or even a Travis Kelce. Or if you want to save that money, don't be afraid to go with someone like Andrews in your flex spot and get a little 2 tight end with it. Also, just again, mentioned this earlier, but Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase in this plenty winnable matchup against the Browns. So Burrow, I know he hasn't beaten the Browns yet as a starter, but I was looking at that total and thinking about taking the under. He still doesn't have much of a problem putting up a lot of points against this group. So again, we'll see what Watson is able to do, but I'm very confident in Burrow and company staying hot, putting up plenty of points.
Not an advocate, but it's worth noting that Watson, like after last week, I think he's like, nobody's going to play Watson, and just he's kind of, and theoretically he showed it in the past, right?
Yeah.
I know still probably got some rust to knock off and all that. And I think it's also interesting, like Mahomes and Allen, two of like just like if you have the nut quarterbacks, you get them on the right week, they're rock solid and nobody has higher ceilings. Like I think Hurts is probably the best amongst those three, but they're not going to get owned all that much. But for what I can tell, as far as Allen, we currently have an 8%, which is pretty low for him or for a 10 gamer. Like every quarterback on average would get 5%, right? This is Josh Allen. He should be different. And Mahomes at 5%. I know the matchup's not great, and there's some concerns. Both those tough matchups. We're not sure how much Denver can actually punch back. And the other part with Mahomes is like, I don't know who to pair him with. There's like he's got 19 receivers. I guess Kelce, but then I'm out of money. The salary cap issues.
Juju and exactly the stuff I was talking about before. But look, he's 5.6, and you're even getting a nice little pivot there off of Garrett and DJ Moore, who are in that same price range. No, I think you're onto something, man. Because what do we, in tournaments, I do think a pretty easy way of getting more unique is largely ignoring the matchups, especially when we have someone like Josh Allen, like Patrick Mahomes, who, Sauce Gardner and the Jets. I can show you a million statistics that say they're a top 5 defense, and that's great. Would we be that surprised if Josh Allen goes for 400 plus and 4 touchdowns? No, because he can do that against anybody.
All right. Any other thoughts as far as quarterback? You want to jump to running back?
We move on to running back and cash. I do think that Isaiah Pacheco 5.7. I know I wish he caught more passes, but look, he is getting 15 plus carries a week. And as much as we do see Jerick McKinnon, playing a lot inside the 5, it's more so just a sign. I know last week he ran right into his blocker and fell down, but like Pacheco, it's something like he only has 7 snaps or 8 snaps inside the 5-yard line, and McKinnon has like over 20, but Pacheco still has more rush attempts inside the 5. So it's annoying to see out there, but I think when McKinnon is on the field at the goal line, they're usually throwing the ball elsewhere anyway. And similar to Miles Sanders, I do think Pacheco does give you enough scoring opportunities regardless, just by virtue of being in such a good offense. So I'm okay with Pacheco. I think I'm okay with Rashad White regardless of whether or not Fournette is going to end up playing. I believe Todd Bowles did say that he's expecting Fournette to be able to tough it out, but he is not at 100%. And if that's the case, man, maybe we do see them really just have Fournette be out there more so in case of emergency style than anything. And even if not, we're still looking at Rashad White, who just turned in a top 10 appearance last week, even with Fournette playing more than expected. So Rashad White, someone that gets all those fantasy friendly targets and on full PPR like DraftKings, I'm okay getting him regardless. And then Travis Etienne, 6.4K. Just in my initial build, that was basically the running back I was feeling more comfortable with. But interesting slate. And again, if we see Fournette somehow get rolled out, I'm guessing Rashad White's ownership is going to to boom, but I don't see the usual, 2 or 3 guys that I just feel like I need to get. I know people might want to be paying up for Derrick Henry, but to your previous points, man, I mean, it really has been a rough stretch for Derrick Henry. And as much as he is still setting career highs in receiving stuff, it's still not that great, compared to a lot of other running backs out there. So you take away Treylon Burks, and I think it's like 52% of his rushes come against boxes of A+ defenders. I mean, that could be sitting closer to 100 without Treylon out there.
So I have several questions as far as running backs. Mixon looks like he's coming back. Do you think he gets standard full workload pre-concussion, or has P. Ryan earned himself a taste? A little bit more of a taste?
Probably a little bit more. I mean, it was really like 75-25 or 70-30 in favor of Mixon. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes more to 60-40. I think all of us, just owe a little bit of an apology to P. Ryan. Remember after the Super Bowl, and it was like, oh my gosh, how could you take Mixon off the field for P. Ryan? And look, I would still, if I was Zach Taylor, I'm starting Mixon. I think Mixon's the better running back, but clearly P. Ryan is pretty damn good in his own right. So I just don't really, I guess Mixon at 6.9, but is his workload going to be that much different than Tony Pollard or Travis Etienne? I really don't think so. So that's just my only thing. I don't feel as much of a need, or I'd rather pay up a wide receiver than running back this week. I think it's my big moral of the story.
Cowboys running backs, you love home favorites, but are they too much of a home favorites? Houston is underdog by 17, 18 points. Their team total, I think, is 3 points lower than how much they're underdog by. We saw them absolutely thrash Indianapolis. They both kind of sort of somewhat got there, Zeke and Pollard. How do you handle the Dallas backfield situation?
Both guys look pretty damn well set up, man. That's the thing. Up 17-point spread. Okay, I hear you. It can get out of hand like it did last week, but in order for it to get out of hand, they got to score a lot of points first, which are obviously going to be good for both of these guys. So Pollard still has had the more fantasy-friendly workload ever since Zeke has come back. He is behind a little bit in the carries. I think it's 48 versus 45 in their 3 games, but he has more targets, and he actually still does have more snaps as well. So I don't think Pollard deserves to be projected higher. That said, man, if Zeke's going to be the guy getting a few more reps at the goal line, wouldn't be the most shocking thing to see him overcome it. So Zeke, Miles Sanders, and Isaiah Pacheco, I think, deserve to be viewed similarly in terms of just their workload. And Zeke obviously has the best matchup of the group.
My apologies if you mentioned them. I know you're firing off a bunch of guys, but I did wanted to ask you about DeAndre Swift. You get a piece of that Detroit-Minnesota game, looks really appealing. Biggest total on the board. Price is pretty solid. And speaking of usage, speaking of carries and touches, it finally shot up last week. I know they're still working in Justin Jackson, but will that sustain? Do you feel good about Swift this week?
One thing I'll say, Lions, DetroitNews.com, Justin Rogers was talking about Swift, and he did bring up that ankle sprain that happened in week 1 still is a problem. And he, maybe it's just him. I don't think he has a specific source inside the organization, but he did bring up Swift still isn't at 100%. And he even threw it out in the universe that maybe they dial back his workload this week after having that usage. So I don't want Swift if he's going to be super chalky. I guess that's my thing. If he was okay, just ho-hum, 10% ownership in tournaments, absolutely, that's fine, because we did see things move in the right direction. But I'd be curious, where the RotoGrinders ownership projections have Swift, because, hey, if he's just middle of the pack, that's fine. In terms of, bad chalk, I do think that could be the case for him, unfortunately, because, Justin Jackson very much still staying involved. And I don't think it's quite all the way back into good graces for Swift, because when we were ranking him as a legit potential top 5, top 8 running back, that was when it was him and Jamal Williams. So even though Justin Jackson in and of himself isn't going to be this big factor, still a guy that is making this more complicated than it should be.
Swift currently the 3rd highest projected own running back.
I think I'm out.
Mixon 22, Henry 19, Swift 17, Pollard 15, Pacheco 14. All right. Anything else as far as running backs? I know we're up against the clock. We got to knock out some receivers as well.
No, we good. I would just say if you're paying all the way up for Henry, knowing how chalky he is, get up to McCaffrey. I'd rather try to spend that extra $600.
Yeah, McCaffrey as it's 10% right now, which is kind of interesting. Yep. Maybe because some people are afraid of that Tampa defense. But like you said, maybe that's not necessarily the case. They're not as bad as we might think in our head. Receivers, as far as cash, you mentioned Amon-Ra. I think Amon-Ra, every single week should just come. Your cash game should come preloaded. How many weeks has he been a cash game staple at receiver? And just the price is not high enough. The usage is too good. He's too awesome. The matchup's great. But you say, go ahead. Go ahead with Amon-Ra and everybody else as far as cash.
Last 15 games not impacted by injury. 6+ catches in all but one of those performances. So Kings stay Kings, and obviously Amon-Ra is a king. Also, if you want to save a little bit of money here, because we got to do it somewhere, Adam Thielen, 4.9K. Zay Jones, 4.7K. Both great matchups with high scoring upside, plenty of volume. And Jamar Chase, if we can get up there at 7.9, especially if Higgins is out, doesn't sound like it is. That's reasonable. Also, shout out to Isaiah McKenzie, just 4.2K against the Jets. Would we be surprised if Josh Allen puts up some big numbers? No. And Isaiah McKenzie has that starting role in the slot these days. And previous to your other point about Deshaun Watson, let's get some Amari Cooper at 6.2 and even Donovan Peoples-Jones at 4.9K. Just again, attacking that Browns-Bengals game, I think could make a lot of sense. And finally, maybe not getting quite as much hype as Amon-Ra, surprisingly, but Chris Godwin, man, has been really consistent ever since coming back in week 4, has at least 6 catches in all those games, and has even started to find the end zone lately. So 6.7K. If you're not going to have Rachaad White in your cash game lineup, I definitely want Chris Godwin.
Look, I'm not here to endorse these guys, but if I'm looking to save some salary, theoretically, the Houston Texans are going to throw the football. Theoretically, they're going to be down by multiple touchdowns. They're without Cooks. They're without Collins. Dorsett is 3K. Moore is 3.4. Are these guys playable? Like, there's going to be targets here, right? They have to be.
No, I don't want anything to do with these guys. Sorry,
I have salary issues. I have to look out here.
That's why we're going low at tight end, man. Greg Dulcich at 3.1 or our guy Chig at just 2.7. So I guess Philip Dorsett, but man, like this just Texans, 14 points seems high.
Yeah. I'm looking for something. I'm looking to save some salary. Try to put some lipstick on a pig that is the Houston Texans, I suppose. Judy's, as if you're looking for a punchback for Denver, he's 5.4, no Sutton. But of course, he's attached.
Stop it! You're talking about these offenses, and it's causing my body to just like cough, and I can't even handle it.
You know what? You're right. My apologies. What's going to make your body feel better is talking about all the fabulous tight end options this week, or not.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Again, and cash going all the way down to Greg Dulcich or Chig. I do think that's the move. If you want to go up though, Andrews and Kelsey in tournaments, I do think makes all the sense in the world. It's tougher to get up there. That's why we're going to like it in cash. The only other guy, man, and hey, I'm happy you called out Watson because I'm hyping up every single one that he should be throwing the ball to. So naturally, we should be higher on Watson this week. David Njoku, just 3.9K. I know has a chance to have slightly limited snaps with his knee injury, but he has been practicing all week. I didn't see if he has a designation going into Sunday, but it does seem like taking last week off has put him closer to 100%. So with Njoku down the stretch, I expect him to be a legit top 5, top 6 fantasy tight end once Watson catches his stride. And right now he's not being priced that way.
Cooper has a hip. He's currently questionable, but I think he even said himself he's likely to play. We'll see. But just note that Njoku expected to play as of 2 hours ago on the old Twitter machine. Anything else to say as far as tight end? And you want to touch on defenses before you step aside and get out of here?
I would just say in cash game on defense, you can go all the way down to Carolina, 2.2K, just because, again, if we're getting one of the bottom ones, we either want them to be facing an opponent that at a minimum we've seen be a little bit turnover play worthy, and that is Geno Smith, man. Again, I mentioned before, very tough to find a stat where he's not top 10. Turnover worthy plays, though, is one of those. And guess what? He makes so many big time throws that I do think like it's worthwhile for him. I'm not slandering Geno, but he will turn the ball over, take a few sacks from time to time, and Brian Burns and that Panthers defense actually pretty good in their own right. If you aren't feeling good about the Panthers and you like the Seahawks, that's fine. Steelers at 2.8K are your guys.
If you have all the money in the world, by all means, Dallas should be a good defense, but highly volatile position. I don't hate, and again, I hate to be doing this, Denver at 2-3, just because it's a good defense, a good unit. I don't know think I'm Mahomes, but it's cheap and it's high variance, and
they're home.
He's going to step back a ton. Like, I want defenses to play against quarterbacks to drop back like 40 times, and then things can happen.
And especially in tournaments, like now you're just, hey, if you're doing that right, now you're also playing into Mahomes and the Chiefs guys not having a good game as well. So, yeah, if we can get the defense blowing up right as – I know there's not a lot of super chalky Chiefs this week in particular, but always good when we can go against the grain in more ways than one.
Ian, it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate you letting me step in this week. Britt, I presume, will be back from his vacation from Disney.
Maybe. Who knows?
Well, you never know. You get lost down there. There's a lot of parks. Yeah, one last time, tell the people where they can find you. It's week 14. They know, but just in case. There's one person out there catching the show for the first time. This Ian guy, he's pretty sharp. Where do I follow this guy? Where do I get his information? Tell him about PFF. Tell him where to find you on Twitter, all the good stuff.
Good talking to you too, my man. At Hartitz on Twitter, PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. We got 5 episodes out per week throughout the season, and I'll have plenty more on the way when we're done. So always a great day to be great. Best of luck to everyone in DFS this week and any potential season-long leagues where you're trying to clinch those playoff spots.
For producer Steve, for Ian, for PFF, for Britt, for Goofy, for Donald, for Mickey, this was the PFF Show Pro Football Focus. We appreciate y'all watching. Go out there and win something. We out ya?